And hello out there. Dom has joined me again for our latest Cryptonut podcast. We've been a little bit quiet while we've been waiting for Dom to get satellite streaming so his video is a little bit better and audio is a little bit better. And I want to welcome Dom back onto our show. It's the 28th of December, Friday, and we're almost leading into 2019. We're going to just do a bit of a Cryptonut end of year wrap up. It's been a horrible bearish 2018. Lots of experts looking pretty foolish as the market cycle has dominated pretty much every expectation that we've had. But however, we're looking at a positive 2019. And what did it take to get such a clear picture of you, Dom?
Well, I'm now on satellite broadband, which has been a big jump up from it was almost a dial-up, it took me back to the 1970s where you had that screeching noise. It was a terrible, I live virtually in the bush, so you can expect some poor satellite. But apparently the satellite reception is excellent, so I'm getting high throughput rate, which is very good.
Yeah.
So
well, the pictures
thanks
are a lot
for the
better.
introduction, Steps. I'd like to send seasonal greetings to everybody who's watching. And I hope you have a brilliant 2019. Like you said, all the experts, and including ourselves, we were expecting a little mini bull run up to 10K and more, which fell flat on its face. And I think it's a good time to recap and see what has happened this 2018, what we've learned, what we've seen. And against the backdrop of, I think, if I may just start on the globally financial markets are a little bit in a turmoil. There's trillions been lost on all these stock exchanges. Inflation has started to hit America, which has made the Fed increase the interest rates, mainly because the financial system can't operate without interest rates and inflation. It just doesn't work. It has to inflate. The money has to be value in order to get forward traction. With that in mind, the US dollar, there's a high demand in US dollar because the interest rates have gone up. So investors are now putting money into the US dollar, which has made the demand for the US dollar high. And the stock exchange is crashing. So investors are withdrawing money. As you've seen, trillions are being lost. They're putting it into the US dollar. And to a large extent, that has stopped any growth for the time being, in any event, on the crypto market. I suspect that commodities like gold will start to increase. And I think there will be some speculative ventures into the crypto market because we're so low in terms of the retracement. I mean, we're talking 90%, less than ICO prices on a lot of the coins. But as Cryptonauts, if anybody's still here, if anybody's watching crypto right now, well done. You've survived the bear market almost. We're nearly at the end of it. It's not far to go. I think that there's more upside than downside. Let's put it that way. So I'm feeling, I wouldn't say bullish, but I'm feeling much more positive than 2018.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things we've learnt is that the market cycle as an overall wins. So it dominates the overall sentiment. It doesn't come down to individual news or any of that type of stuff. It's what goes on as the market or the market energy of the entire space is what dominates, and that's what we've seen on this cycle. So cycle 3 was hit the end of December last year, 2017, and we've watched a bear trend all year. A lot of experts talking about 10K Bitcoin, 25K Bitcoin this Christmas. I talked about a mini Christmas run. I didn't actually set too much of a target, but I think I did get it. It did run for about 5 days. So there was a little bit of profit taking there over Christmas, and obviously on a couple of days ago, all that profit's been taken, and we're seeing a little bit of a retrace now. And we will just, before we press play on this video, we're looking at some charts and looking. Again, there's a lot of talk about the bottom end of this cycle 3 leading into cycle 4. Are we at the bottom? Have we seen the first touch of the bottom for Bitcoin? And then possibly 1 or 2 retests in January in February. That's what I believe. I think, the people who were talking about the overall cycles, I think have got it right. And hopefully that will also translate into a very similar forecast for cycle 4, which we touched on in the last video. And if that 3 years away, which gives us great opportunity to accumulate. But again, and I'm pretty open to share some of those charts if you want to, or we can just talk about it, where we possibly could see a retest in the first couple of weeks of January. I mean, history shows the last 5 years have been a bit of a systematic dump of the market in the first 10 days of January, and then a little bit of sideways action for 1 or 2 months, and then it sort of livens up again. And I think that's going to be no different for this bottom end of this cycle. And another thing to add is we've got the halving of Bitcoin in May 2020. History shows that energy starts to pick up towards it, say 6 months prior. The peak of the halving is normally about 12 months after the halving date, so we're looking at 2021. With all the news of STOs and institutions and BARKed and ETFs and more energy coming in, I think the energy will come in once we hit a true bottom. I mean, the big boys probably have a criteria of entry. I think they are accumulating now, no doubt, but I think they'll have a slush fund and they'll pull the trigger at some stage. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what has skewed the market a lot is the over-the-counter sales. I did a calculation. There's 1,800 bitcoins mined each day in 24 hours. That's just over 500,000 coins in 1 year. And the over-the-counter sales don't influence the price of Bitcoin. So it would make sense for institutions and the guys with big money, because you need a large amount of capital to conduct over-the-counter sales, to buy sales when Bitcoin is at 3,000, and it doesn't affect. So you could buy technically a couple of thousand Bitcoins and it won't affect the price. And I think this is what skewed, or what has given the impression that there's no interest in Bitcoin. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I think every single spare Bitcoin has been soaked up by the institutions. They've been accumulating for months.
And we're assuming,
it's not reflected in the charts.
And we're assuming that these big mining groups are actually parting with their Bitcoin. They'll have their own strategies for them. I mean, they might be holding, they might have subsidies in place with their relative governments. I think in China, there's no doubt they've been getting some reduction on power bills and things like that. So they might have agreements in place that we don't see in regards to retaining Bitcoin. So it's not all as clear as we think, especially with OTC.
Absolutely. I think Bitmain employs 3,000 employees, and there were some articles going around that they've retrenched between 60 and 80% of those employees because of the lack of the cost of running the mining operations was higher than the return. And like any business, that you would sort of cut back when things you don't want to plow all your money back into a black hole. So it would suggest to me that either they've stopped or cut down the expenses and possibly are holding on to Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, because these miners do operate on several levels. And we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. It's a very, because it's decentralized and autonomous, we don't get the reports. We don't get financial reports on the Bitcoin market. All we can see is new wallets being produced and the amount of transactions that take place and the hash rate difficulty. We don't see the inner workings. We don't know how much of it is retail really even. We know that retail is very small. I mean, there's been so much talk about institutional money coming in, ETFs, backed, all these, and they've been almost like false starters in getting the market going. I can see that there's been attempts to try to kickstart the market again, but each time it's failed because the bear pressure has been so great this year. And I think a lot of it is to do with people being disillusioned who've bought in at the top, and they've just seen the market go one way, and how many of those are still holding?
Well, I'll add to that. I think the big reason the market moves so dependently on Bitcoin and due to the overall sentiment of the market is due to the fact that the retail market is so small. It is still only 1%. I mean, you and I, when we make a trade, we're not influencing the market. The people who influence the market are the whales. They're the big boys. They're the big cartels. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt they are in charge of the cycle. That's why crypto is still not on your daily, 7 p.m. news. It's not mainstream yet at any degree. So I think the retail market percentage is still under 1% or 1%. Some people have stepped away from the market due to the bear trend. They've lost position. They either got in really late last year and Christmas. They've been emotionally damaged from that whole experience. So that they will come back later. And I think if you and I were going to be making a prediction as gurus in the space, I would be really reluctant to make a prediction. But what I would probably do now is I'd actually say, well, and I've pretty much had this premise. Anyone that's been following me from the start, I've always talked about zooming out. I've always talked about the overall market. And that's because I believe in the fact that the retail market's so small and that it's purely controlled by big money. And it will be like that until the market cap is 10 times, 20 times, 50 times bigger. So for me, my prediction is Bitcoin will start to rise next year. Right, this is a really easy prediction. Right, it's going to rise next year, probably after the first 6 months and leading into the halving. Right, so this is based on history. We know that the halving in May 2020 is going to cause some new energy. Then 12 months to 18 months after the halving, so after May 2020, we could potentially see the beginning or top of or a shoulder of the next cycle 4 bull run. Now, whether the bull run hits in 2021, will it be at a December type of scenario? Will it be over 30 days? Will it be over, maybe this one's going to be bigger. I think it's going to be bigger. Maybe it's going to be over 3 months. Could it be over a year? Some people have got charts showing the top of the next bull run being in 2023. However, with the halving being in 2020, I think, and with all of the stuff all the institutional framework that's in place, I can see a really strong 2020 to 2023. And as a strategy, this is not financial advice. I think as a strategy, you'd want to make sure you've got an exit plan of some degree. I mean, we don't live forever. If you're going to be an investment, I think you've got to have an exit strategy. You can't just hodl. Hodl is probably the worst advice possible, except at this period of time of the market. Hodl at the bottom, sell at the top. It's very basic stuff. But again, I think what we've got to do is we've got to look at the overall market cycle. Did you want to bring up that graph? Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I'd just like to add to what you've said,
Yeah.
Sebs. I think the backdrop here is that in 2008, that was the last recession that we had. Bitcoin was born out of it rose from the ashes of total financial mismanagement by the big institutions, the banks, and everything else. That's what really, to put it bluntly, pissed everybody off, and they looked to something else. Now, since then, we've not really had a recession, so this is going to be a testing ground for Bitcoin, I think. Yeah. Because we're moving into a possible recession, certainly over the next 2 to 3 years, I would guess for sure that we're going to have some sort of recession.
I think it's already starting.
Gold. Yeah, gold is controlled. It's never really it's manipulated to the point where you hardly get any growth in gold. It's a very small percentage, and it's regulated that way through manipulation, I believe. We've got the housing market, which was another source of investment, which is collapsing all over the world. In Australia, we've got a pending interest-only crisis coming to fruition over the next 12 months, I suppose, because a lot of people have had extensions. We're going to see some pressure. The market in China has also had the same problem. You can imagine interest rates rising in America, which is going to put more pressure on mortgage holders. But the biggest thing that's been happening is this continued bull run on the stock exchange, where it has been way over its time, and companies have been taking advantage of the cheap money, were virtually interest free, and they've been doing stock buybacks. So you have a situation where on the balance sheet of the company, you borrow money at zero interest rates and you buy back stock, mainly from investors and those in the know, because they know it's not going to last forever. So they get top dollar for their shares. It also artificially upholds the stock exchange because it shows that the stock is still relatively high. And meanwhile, it's almost a bubble which is waiting to pop, which is what's happened now. So we've got all these things happening. And there's two things that can happen here, Sebs. One, crypto is a speculative investment. Will investors that are looking for a secure return invest in crypto? That's the first question. If the answer is no, because it is too speculative, then crypto will just bumble along and get some organic growth. Or two, are investors going to say, well, hang on a minute, this crypto market, which has been the best performing asset class in the past 10 years, it's hit an all-time low. Wouldn't it be wise to invest 10 to 15% of the portfolio, or maybe even 3% of the portfolio, because we're talking trillions here, into the crypto market, which could cause the beginning of the next bull run? So these things are not clear right now, except the fact that we've got graphs from experienced analysts that predict mood cycle, emotional cycles, because it is emotional. We're all conditioned, we're all emotional creatures. And it shows the beginning of a bull run after the halving, because the quantity of Bitcoins available is cut down by half. So it becomes more of a scarce commodity. And you won't have as much over-the-counter sales. And every time there's been a halving, we've had a bull run in the year afterwards. So I tend to agree with you. And I think that what is really exciting is it could go either direction. We could have the beginnings of bull run a lot sooner with all the instruments that are going in place, depending on the rest of the markets. And you can't ignore the rest of the financial markets. Those have a bearing on everything, I think. So my prediction is similar to yours. I think that Bitcoin will find a stabilized level of 4,800 to 6,000 again, so maybe in the second quarter of next year. That seems to be sort of the even level. That's where the miners start switching on their rigs again and everything else. And I think that is just going to set the foundation back in place. And I think from that point on, these institutions will dabble with all these funds they're going to have that investors have taken out of the stock exchange, that no longer have faith in the equities markets, because I don't think the equity market has hit the low yet. I think it's going to get worse than that. And they're going to put it either into gold. I think gold is going to do very well next year. But I also think that crypto, as a high risk, high reward option, will be taken up.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going to drive it.
I'm going to add to that. I was meant to press play on our clock, our little clock, but I didn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a 10-minute clock. So we're going to wrap this up. It's called the 10-minute wrap up. Now I'm going to press that. So we've got 9 minutes from here. Yeah. I'm a bit of a skeptic in regards to the whole crypto. I mean, I'm a crypto nut through and through. I mean, there's obviously a lot of positives and negatives to being cashless and all these things. And we're not going to talk about that today. But I think I can see that I do believe that it all is by design, in the sense that I think there's going to be a migration from the traditional markets over to crypto at some stage over the next 1 to 2 years. But who's going to lead the way is the big thing. And I think really the way human nature is, a lot of people take a conservative back foot step and wait for the collective to make a decision. From an institution point of view, obviously they're already doing it. They're setting up the framework. I think over the next 3, 4, 5 months we're going to see this bottom, right? So we know that Bitcoin's going to hit a bottom It's going to stay there for a little period of time, and then the market will pop, it'll recover, and I think we'll see some more turmoil in the markets in America. We know there's a whole heap of pressure on the markets over there. We've seen that in the last week in the Dow and everything. It's all had dropped significantly, and I think there'll be this swing of cash moving over from the stock markets, from Wall Street, but it will be done in a way, maybe a little bit of an announcement. I think there will need to be a problem, and then there'll be a solution. And I think the solution is cashless crypto. But at the moment, the perspective from the common folk is that crypto is just this Bitcoin speculative gambling thing on the side. It's not perceived as the solution yet. So I think over the next 12 months, there needs to be an advertised, well-marketed problem. And that's why I think we're going to see some issues from a geopolitical point of view, whether that's, I don't want to talk about war, but I think maybe a stock market crash of some sort. And then there will be a lot of media, and then there will be media towards providing the solution, which could be Bitcoin, could be a particular platform, it could be maybe JP Morgan and these guys are going to come forward with a solution, their trading desk or whatever it is. There has to be a catalyst, mainstream reason for people to switch. We've talked about STOs, so the crypto or on blockchain securities coming over, and I think that's already being built and ready to roll out in 2019. So we may see something of that on mainstream as well. Maybe it will be the gold and silver mines moving their stocks over to crypto-based platforms. I'm not sure, but I can see that being part of the future, and it's going to happen in the next 1, 2, 3 years. We've got a halving, we've got a bull run, we've got cycle 4, we've got cycle 5 probably going to hit 2030. This is all by design. When's it going to happen? And there has to be very strategic messages and marketing to align with that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that we're at the point of a paradigm shift in the way markets are going to be conducted in future. I think tokenization. I think that all stocks are going to be tokenized, all property is going to be tokenized, and you'll be buying stocks in Amazon and Apple like you would crypto. I think everything's going to be tokenized. I think that the days of specialist traders, and they'll always be there because they know the markets well, but everything's going to be tokenized. If you go back 80 years, the conditions that we currently find ourselves in would be we have the ability to self-destruct, so things are taken a little bit more cautiously. But nevertheless, we are in a financial standard has not been a good thing. A high degree of control and manipulation. You can see it in the media. I mean, these guys don't sit there twiddling their thumbs. They plan for the next decade. I think you mentioned yesterday, Seb, that they plan for the next decade, the next generation. And that's what's happening now.
Yeah, we're talking 50-year plans. So a lot of what we've seen, I mean, we can talk about controversial things like 9/11 and stuff like that. I also believe a lot of these mainstream events are all been well devised years before, and I think that's what's happening. And when I talked about generational wealth, some of these corporations and old school wealth who have got major interests in corporates, they're going to be planning their next 100 years. They want the next generation of their family bloodlines coming through in very, very strong positions, and I think that's what this is all about. Look, there's no doubt when that's your goal, manipulation is going to be part of the game. Well, 4 minutes.
It makes sense. It makes sense if you consider that 90% of the wealth of the world is in the hands of 4 or 5%. Let me tell you that of those 4 or 5%, you probably have a few families that can get together. They can decide on an action plan, and they can carry that out. It's impossible retail market. You've got millions of people putting in $100. You can never get consensus between millions of people with low volume, but you certainly can get consensus with 10 or 12 people that control trillions. So it makes, purely from a logical point of view, the guys with the big money that know each other will plan for the future. Now, the question is, we as retail, we're the small guys, what do? Well, we have to think like them in a way. We have to assume the worst and plan for the best. And it wouldn't make sense for them to get involved in the crypto market if there wasn't going to be a big carrot at the end of the day. The potential for Bitcoin to reach $1 million is greater than the value of $1 million US retaining its value today.
Oh, absolutely. And then they're also not going to market this fact on mainstream.
No.
And we're not going to see any of this. So, I mean, you and I talk about it, and people who watch our podcasts who are in crypto and have been in here for a period of time, we know, we're not going to see any mainstream talk until 2030. And I believe that's after cycle 4 and after cycle 5, after the recession, after the biggest transfer of wealth in history. You talk about Mike Maloney used to talk about the greatest transfer in wealth, and he was talking about gold and silver. But I think a lot of it's going to be done with crypto. It's going to slosh over. So all the people that are in really strong positions over the next 7 years, or what is it? It's 2019, so we've got 11 years left. But I'm only planning for cycle 4, which is 21 to 23. Somewhere in there, we're going to find a new shift towards crypto, and we're going to see another bull run. It's just going to happen. And I think I did talk about this with you, is that one characteristic of humanity is that these big boys like their money, and greed is something that they're going to find really hard to resist. So that's why they're going to really push this cycle 4 and 5. But the way they'll deal with that is they'll control the media. And all the laggers.
Ultimately.
Yeah. And anyone that's not researching and doing what they need to be doing now is going to be entering at 2030, and it's going to be too late in that sense.
We are in a digital age, Sebastian. I think everything today is becoming more and more digitized. We are relying on apps more. We're almost self-diagnosing our symptoms on digital media. It makes perfect sense for money to be digitized. I mean, it's already even fiat money is digitized. We now can use PayPal and things where we don't have to go to the bank. I mean, going to the bank and queuing up and depositing cash is dying out. So it makes sense that there has to be a migration over to digitized cash. And what better asset could you have than something that is decentralized, that you don't rely on the banks? So it makes perfect sense. The whole idea of crypto makes perfect sense. And I think that even though it's still a minority of people are beginning to become aware of it. And once they start asking the questions and they see the ease of use and its reliability and the fact that transaction costs are going to reduce and speed is going to increase because all things improve all the time, it's a no-brainer. It has to happen. And I think that there has to be a watershed moment, like you've said. There has to be some point where those that have accumulated the most will press the button and start the conveyor belt of the next massive bull run, because there's a finite quantity of everything in crypto.
Yeah, and it's all about getting in early, and we know that the early stage is to get in early for cycle 4 is going to be the next 2 years, before the halving, right? So we've got 17 months, really, and then we know there's a bit of a lag before it all starts to kick in. And I think then the next stage for crypto is that it's going to be the ease of technology. And we talked about the monolith here, right, 2001. It's going to be the ease of applications to enable the common folk, which is us, more ease on getting involved. At the moment, it's still a little bit complicated, but that's also by design. It's going to need another 10 years. Maybe in 10 years' time, there'll be courses at school. There'll be how to use blockchain, and primary school kids or something are learning how to use basic apps and things like that, or learning how to integrate with the new system. Well, we don't know. Maybe it's just going to be one of those things that generations will have to adjust to. Just like you and I did when we came through the 80s and 90s, computers and mobile phones and Sega, all these different things. we've had to keep up with it to stay relevant. And I think that's a choice. Now, our clock has expired, Dom. I reckon to finish off 2019, I'm pretty excited. I think the next two months are going to be pretty horrible. I think we're going to see this true bottom of Bitcoin, and our portfolio is going to get hammered even more. What are the 3 top coins without financial advice? Just what excites you in very quickly? What 3 blockchain projects excite you the most in 2019?
Okay. Wow.
Just 3.
First of all,
I know it's impossible, but just 3.
The one that excites me the most is ELA, because I think it's going to revolutionize the way we use the internet and the way wealth is going to be protected on the internet. And I think that is a paradigm shift from where we are. And I think that's sorely needed. So ELA is an exciting one. I think BACS for me is also an exciting one, because I've just got an iPhone 10. I've got an iPhone 10 here. And the facial recognition on that is amazing. I mean, you just look at the thing and it unlocks. Now, biometrics are being used by BAD to actually encrypt keys. So that's going to make it easy for anyone to have an account where your face is your private keys. So I think that is probably a solution to this complicated seed and problems with remembering codes and losing wallets and so forth. So BACS is a good one. In terms of platforms, you said 3. Wow, that's a big ask, eh?
Yeah, I know it's hard. It's very hard. But number 3, what do you got?
Together for my last one. I said Neo, EOS, and Ontology.
Yeah.
Because those 3 platforms cover a whole host of other platforms, and they're going to be digitizing assets, and they've got the speed coming through, and they're going to be things that we're going to be using in the future. So it's ELA, BACS, and then the platforms, and specifically EOS, Neo, and Ontology, because they're planning for STOs. They're way ahead of the game. And I think it's only going to come to fruition once we see the rubber hit the road, and that's not happened yet.
Yeah.
So those are my favourites.
Right. Well, some of those overlap mine. I do like BACS. I think BACS for the mainstream adoption ideology, in the sense that they're going to make it really easy to have a bank account, where you can also do all the relevant services that our current banking system provides. So you can have peer-to-peer loans. You and I could lend money to each other, and we can earn interest. I think that's revolutionary,
Yes.
And we can control that through smart contracts, and you can earn a residual, and we could join together. And I think it's going to be one of those moments where we realise the potential of blockchain. So I think the first company or the first entity that gets a banking licensed on blockchain with a really good app, it's going to do really well. I do like EOS. I know EOS gets a lot of flack. I mean, they've just been voted #1 in China again. Dan Larimer, he's not stupid. He knows how to make a very, very fast blockchain. And it doesn't really matter about what people don't like with blockchains, just because we can always evolve them. And I think that's the big thing. When they've got teams that are actively present and looking to improve and listen to the community and bring in new innovation, you can only see them improving. So I do like EOS for its speed and all the benefits of that. And I have been following Dan from the start. I mean, I'm a bit of a groupie in that sense, because one of the first platforms I got onto was Steemit. I was just doing some blogging, and I enjoyed making some money, sharing myself and from the coaching and stuff like that. And then I obviously just learnt more and more about blockchain from that community. I do like ELA for what they're doing with all their TV set-top boxes and their nodes and their ability to probably revolutionise the internet, and how they're going to bring in ONT and all these other, what we talked about, like it was a Chinese web, wasn't it? It was a collection of blockchain projects
Strategic.
working together. Yeah, and I mean, China is going to have a very, very, they're going to have a very powerful ecosystem, and they're going to want to keep control of it, and they're going to be very loyal to their own blockchains. No doubt that blockchain is also worldwide, but I think the Chinese ecosystem is going to be massive. Beyond that, I've got another 70 projects I really like. I mean, I do like Neo. I'm still a bit of a soft spot for Verge, only because it's so decentralised. But it can get a bit messy in the Telegram group. And then there's Enigma, which is doing private smart contracts. I mean, there's so many. CVC Coin for a really good private communications app. I mean, and you can go down the list. But again, it's up to us to do the research, and I don't think there's going to be just one winner. I think there's going to be winners in all the different industries, and you've just got to pick your racehorse. And I think just get excited for the things and the platforms that you're going to use. If you're going to use it, it's probably going to have more relevance in your life.
I think there's going to be more integration with this cross-chain interaction, like side chains like ELA and ICX and NEO. They've been planning for cross-chain interaction, same with EOS. I think that's the way of the future. I think there's going to be, in the future, we're going to have applications that will do a myriad of things using a whole host of blockchains and second layer speed enhancing technologies, which we're going to be oblivious to. We're just going to see this thing work, and that's the way we're going to do it.
So 2000.
Right now we sort of see the individuals. We see all the pieces of the puzzle. But in the future, I think we're going to have a full vision of what's going to happen.
Yeah. So next year, it's going to be Lightning Network, STOs, so securities coming over like Barked, Fidelity, some of these other stuff. I'm not really interested in talking about the ETF. I don't think we need it. We need more. We need life in the system. We need more money coming in. There's also going to be innovation in the sense of atomic swaps, like you said. I think any of those side chain or the ability for the blockchains to communicate seamlessly with each other. I think it's also going to be the year where all the ICOs and the products come out. So more apps, more functionality, more ability for mainstream adoption like BAB, and we've already seen Pillar wallets come out. Ethos has got their wallet. BAB's going to be doing theirs. I mean, that's where it starts. I think it starts with the phone apps. Then there's going to be probably some more desktop, laptop-based platforms. But I think it does start with the phones and anything that's going to get the millennials in, things that they're using or they want to interact. And I think there'll be some new social media platforms. I think Facebook was talking about bringing out their own cryptocurrency. I reckon it's going to be a race. I know Dan Larimer's talking about bringing out a social media. So there's a big push to maintain control over certain industries. The companies that do not migrate to blockchain and build communities, I think in 10 years, 20 years' time, are going to probably die. That's a scary thing for some of these massive multi-trillion-dollar companies, like even Apple, even Amazon, eBay, all these big Alibabas. If they don't adapt and adopt, they're going to suffer. So that's all I've got. You got anything to finish with, Dom?
No, I think the last point you mentioned. I think a lot of these people like Google and Apple and Yahoo, they're going to have to relinquish some of their power to remain in the game. At the moment, everything's one-sided. They scrape our data. They're going to have to pay people for the data they use. So they're going to have to relinquish the power, and that's the fight. I think that's going to be the struggle, because ultimately a decentralized system, consensus will win, not the big companies. And I think that the erosion of power will take place, and that's what attracts everyone.
Yeah,
and I think is a good thing.
And I think the collective consciousness of the planet now has more awareness of our data skimming. We're starting to maybe we've seen all the uprising in France, so I'm all for it in the sense that, I don't believe in governments. I believe in community consensus. I believe in this type of relationships. You and I could definitely contribute to our communities. More communication, that's what the internet's going to bring, more decentralised consensus. But it takes education, it takes, I think, natural human instincts for better. And getting rid of the authorities that have been abusing humanity for such a long period of time. Won't happen everywhere, I get it. Doomsday conspiracy theorists will talk about that it's never going to happen, we're not going to have a utopia, but I think there's certain elements, definitely, where we can take our power back, and I think it does start with decentralisation, more communication, education, and blockchain. Hopefully, depending on where you participate, if you want to participate in centralisation, go for it. If you want to participate and be a part of and contribute towards decentralisation, do it. And I think the more people that do that and believe in that and have confidence in that, is going to be the strength of blockchain in the future. I'm going to wrap it up, Tom. So thanks for our end of year wrap up. I think that we added some value there, and hopefully our viewers get something from that. I'm always interested to hear what people think in the comments. If they want to add something, or they a part of this video stimulated their interest in crypto, then we want to hear about it. And we're going to do another podcast soon in the new year. We're going to just let the hangovers calm down. It's that time of year where we're all just sort of having a bit of a sit back and relax. But I look forward to talking to you in early January and seeing what happens with the bottom of Bitcoin and this 2019 run.
Yes, same here, Sebs.
All right.
All the best for the new year to anyone who's watching, and we wish you all the best, and thanks for watching. Okay. Much appreciated.
All good. Thanks, mate.
Bye-bye.